Hi, I built a self-hosted TripIt replacement that keeps your data private. I've flown millions of miles, I've visited 50 plus countries, and keeping my travel organized is very important. And I've been using TripIt for the last many years. TripIt does a good job, but they're owned by a travel company that likes to sell you things. So it's a privacy concern. What are they using my data for? There are confirmation numbers in there that get uploaded. So it's not perfect from a privacy point of view. There's also over the years a list of things that I wish TripIt would support or had features for that are either in other applications or just things that I want in my personal version. So with the power of AI, I went about and created my own customized version of TripIt for me. So I call it My Trip Planner. I'm going to walk through the application and what I've built. Then I'm going to talk about how I go about deploying this, because I know I've covered a little bit of that in past videos, but I kind of glossed over that. I'm going to do a deeper dive in this video that just goes over how I deploy, in this case, my app, but you can apply that to deploy any open source or any GitHub-based project in your environment. And then lastly, I'll just cover kind of learnings from this AI coding cycle. It took me about 3 days on and off, not full time, to build the app. And it still needs a little bit of work, as you'll see as I walk through it, but it's in pretty good shape for 3 days of AI coding effort. So let's jump in. So the TripIt app, or the TripIt replacement app, My Trip Planner, basically will look like this when you first log in. I only supported Google authentication because that's what I use, but if you wanted to support other things, you could just add that to the application itself. So when you do log in, this version, I haven't pushed the Google auth to production, so it's in test, but that's just a configuration question if I wanted to open this up to other people. You are going to give Google some permissions, or you're going to give the app some permissions. It lists no BGP as who's requesting service, because that's the URL that I'm going to be hosting this from. And I'll explain that a little bit more later. So after you log in with Google, you're basically in the app. You have nothing here. You can start importing things directly. And if you are doing this for the first time and you say, oh, just scan my inbox and find all my confirmation numbers and pull those and build my trips for me, the app will do that just like TripIt. You will have to give the app, or you have to give Google permission for the app to go read your inbox. So if you hit that for the first time, you'll get that. I've done that in the past, so if I clicked it here, it won't give me that permission request again. But you can upload your trips from your email. You can upload documents if you've got your PDFs and you just want to upload it that way. I'm going to flip to a dev version of this that has some pre-populated test data that I have, just so everybody can see it. But in the dev version, so I've got some test data in here. Once you've got data in here, you've seen itinerary, very similar to TripIt. I added a mapping feature. So the mapping feature will show you your trip, your location, and it will show you everything that you have in your itinerary that has an address. So you can see here, this is Vancouver, the airport, the hotel, where we're going skiing. If you put in a bunch of restaurants, it would map those out for you. I guess while I'm talking, I'll just go through some caveats. I'm using Mapbox, which has a good, generous free tier. So I'm using that to do this map pinning and showing users where their events are. It is not great for things in certain countries like China. Also, the Mapbox API is very picky about foreign languages. So you have to really parse the information you give to Mapbox correctly before they'll put the pin in the right spot. So there are some hiccups and things you'll go through there, but for English addresses, not a problem. I do have a notes feature, which is a global notes or a trip notes kind of function. If you have notes on the trip itself, if the trip is months out, it will just show you historical weather information, so you know how to plan and pack. If your trip, like in this test version, is soon, within the next 10 days, I do pull weather API information, so you get the actual per day weather reports, weather forecasts in there. So that's nice, so you can plan ahead better. There is a packing list function within the app, so you can mark off things that you need. add specific items that aren't listed here. If you've got special things that you want to remember, you can click them all off, and I remember my toothbrush, marks it off. Good. Things that you can do like that. You can upload documents, tickets, reservations, anything you need, driving directions to a specific event location or to somebody's house. Just drop it in here, you'll get access to that. You can obviously share this with other people. This is the trip sharing function. There's also a global sharing function if you want to share everything with your spouse or your other family members. So you can add people as read-only, or they have full access. They can also edit the trip. If they're going on the trip, you can click this box. I'll show you the stats in a second, but then obviously if they're on the trip, then all their stats will add up. Trip settings, you can basically change some things. There's a planning status that does show up on the trip view where you can see confirm, completed planning, things like that. There are tags which you can add to trips or the actual events, and then you can search by titles, locations. If you want to search for something I recommended for lunch, you can go. There's a global stats field, which gives you all of your trips, how long you've been, countries you've been to, cities you've visited, things like that. There is also global settings feature, which again, you can share your entire account with somebody so they can see and or edit everything. It also has a function or a feature that after everything gets created, you can copy this and subscribe to this calendar into your Google, Apple, whatever calendaring program you're using. This is just a standard space ICS calendar feed. So you get all your calendared events in your calendar, and then you can reset this. So again, very similar to TripIt. And that's the basic functions of the application. There are a few things that are still coming, and if you go to GitHub, and we'll get to the how to build this later, it shows upcoming things that are still pending. But in general, everything works and it's working well. So that's the quick walkthrough of the app. So now I'm going to show you how I go about actually deploying the app. So I have a version, like I said, this version's on my dev server on my computer. This one is actually what I'm considering production, running on a Raspberry Pi in my house. This is the GitHub project. It is public. It is free. Feel free to do anything you want with it. Here is my deployment screenshot, and I'm just going to let this kind of run in the background. But basically, I always just have the NoBGP MCP server do all of my deployments for me. This deployment is a little bit takes a long time because one, you've got to download all the dependencies to the Raspberry Pi, which takes a while. It does have a Postgres, Redis, and a MinIO Docker containers all running to support this application. So if you quickly just go to tech stack, this is the tech stack that I'm running. So there is a bunch of stuff it has to download and configure, plumb it all together to make it all work. The NoBGP MCP, I basically just told it to deploy this GitHub project, gave it the URL to my NoBGP node, gave it the host name or the device name, and off it goes, and it reads the GitHub information, reads all the GitHub requisites, goes through the steps, knows what it needs to go set up the Google auth, all the Docker containers, how to publish a URL on NoBGP, things like that. So it goes off and does all of that work. And it's doing that all in the background. It did run into a couple of issues where, because I did the development on my Mac, not all of the Dockerfile setups included all the ARM64 components or versions for a Raspberry Pi. So it had to reconcile those and fix those. But it will just keep running, and roughly 20 minutes later, it was complete and I could run the application. So again, there's not anything like I've become super lazy with the NoBGP MCP server and being able to deploy code on my nodes by just giving Claude, in my case, simple commands like deploying this project to a node. And then any issues, it either fixes on its own or it asks me the question, you've got these two choices, which one would you rather use? And then I answer and it moves forward. So I'm not going to sit here and have the screen and command line go through 20 minutes, but you get the idea that this is how the deployment works using the NoBGP MCP server. So this did take me about 3 days off and on to AI code this. With all my projects, I start with documents and requirements. So I start with PRD, architecture, diagrams, API specifications. So where I would rather not code anything myself, I am technically enough to read some of the specifications that AI creates and go, well, that's not going to work, or I think we should do it a different way. So that's always where I start. Just like everything in general life, the more instructions and better instructions you give someone, the more likely you're going to be happy with the results. So that's always where I start. And then Claude is my favorite LLM for coding just because it does a great job of taking the task, figuring it out, breaking it into segments. So I think it initially created 8 sprints, 8 different sections that it was going to work on. And we just worked through each one at a time until we built the entire project. I did have it create extra documentation. So there's an architecture document in here as well, so that everyone else or another AI could understand the technical architecture besides the original kind of PRD-ish technical explanation. The basic features we've already gone over, similar to TripIt. The tech stack, let me just explain a few things that are going on in the tech stack. So it does use Google Auth. You can only sign in with Google. I did not want to store usernames and passwords just for the security risk that I don't want to have to take the burden of if I'm hosting this for 100 of my friends, or if I released a SaaS version and was actually trying to productize this. I personally at this point don't want passwords, right? So I would let somebody else handle the auth and use that to log in. If you're using this in a production kind of SaaS scale deployment, you can put this in AWS and use S3. Because I'm running this locally and I'm just planning on hosting this for me and my family, then MinIO is the free S3 compatible open source equivalent. I do have it connected to Claude to do the parsing and extraction of the travel information from either your email or the documents you upload. So I tested a few different ways to do this and decided that I just wanted to be simple. So I do have Claude set up. It is pointed to Sonnet. Sonnet is enough processing power to do parsing of travel information. I tried a little bit with Haiku, the lower model, and it was not able to consistently parse data, so I had to move to Sonnet. So that works out well. Because there's files that have to be uploaded, it is running ClamAV to scan the files before as they're uploaded. So I'm using NoBGP to create the SSL, the HTTP URL. So it's a proxy going to the application, but it's also creating an SSL endpoint, which is used and required for the Google Auth URL. So when you do the Google Auth, Google Cloud setup for auth credentials, you have to give it the URL people are signing in from, and you need an actual fully qualified domain. So I did that. Again, for friends and family, having a NoBGP random letter combination.nobgp.com URL is fine. If you wanted to make this a little bit more professional or whatever, you would want an actual domain name that you use for that. So that's in place. I think everything else is self-explanatory. Next.js as the front end. I'm using Mapbox again as the map API or rendering, and that's on a free tier. So the only thing I'm paying for is the Claude API usage of whatever is being parsed. Everything else is free that I'm using myself. Mapbox does have a token, but their free tier is very large. NoBGP as well. NoBGP has for personal usage, no paid plan available. So you definitely can do that for free. That's about it. It was a fairly good experience. I'm actually more and more impressed with what you can do. AI coding. I thought this project was going to take me about 2 weeks of going back and forth and fixing everything, but really it only took me 3 days of off and on effort. And then just to make it clear, I was using Claude Opus to do all of the coding for me. So I hope that was helpful. Either you want your own self-hosted TripIt replacement and that you can just use this as is, take the code and deploy it yourself. If you are deploying it, you can definitely use NoBGP to deploy it for you, or just follow the README instructions. You can use Caddy and other proxies to get your URL if that's what you want to do as well. And if you have any vibe coding questions or suggestions on things I should do to improve my personal AI coding workflow, let me know. Thanks.